If we just keep repeating the past, we're going to have the same results. So focusing the rest of this presentation on what we can do to replicate this success, and really in particular focusing on personas, relationships, and most importantly, engagement and the impact it has on results. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. For those of you that haven't met me, my name's Adam. I'll be in charge here today. I'm here with Guy. We'll give it another minute or so before we do a formal introduction. It'd be good to get some engagement in the chat. So if you want to put your name and location and tell us where you're listening in from, it'd be good to hear. Apparently, we're live on LinkedIn as well, Adam. Our first time, I think, on LinkedIn. LinkedIn Live. Wow. Well, you're a celebrity on LinkedIn, guys, so no doubt there'll be just as much reach there as there is here. Hello, Kristen from Raleigh, North Carolina. Nice to see your name on the screen. Okay, right, let's dive in. I think there's plenty of people joining. Nice to see you, Stephen from London. Right, so welcome to the second of our webinar series. This webinar is all about how B2B sales leaders can drive better relationships and engagement. As I said, my name's Adam. I run the commercial side of things here at Ebsta. We have here today our illustrious leader, Guy Rubin, CEO of Ebsta. Guy's taken this presentation or variations of this presentation all over the world, and it's great to have you all come and join us today. So Guy, without any further ado, let's dive in. Let's do it. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for everyone joining. If you happen to join the one we did about a month ago, the first few slides are the same. So we're going to bring everybody up to speed. I can promise you the rest of the content is brand new. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy putting it together. So we're going to focus today on what we can do to what we call beat the benchmarks. So most of you will be aware of the B2B benchmark report that we produce with Pavilion. Last year, we analyzed 4.7 million opportunities that represented $57 billion worth of pipeline. And for the first time ever, we also analyzed 1.2 million hours of sales calls. We've got some interesting insights from what's actually going on in our discovery calls and going on during the sales cycles. So before we jump into the area, the focus of the presentation around beating the benchmarks, I thought it was a useful exercise to start by talking a little bit about where we were at the beginning of 2024. So at the end of last year, we saw 2023 was a really tough year for most businesses in certainly in B2B SaaS. We saw win rates drop, deal values had dropped by over 20%, and sales cycles had got longer. We also saw that 69% of reps were missing quota, and nearly half of deals were slipping past their anticipated close dates. So we really entered 2024 and it was quite tough economic background behind us. Where we saw such a dramatic change in the numbers, we actually ran the report a second time in July this year. So we produced an update for the report, which at the end of the presentation, in fact, you've got a link to this. So what we call the H1 updates. And unfortunately, the numbers hadn't really moved in our favor. So we can see here that the number of the percentage, the delta between the top performing sales reps and the rest of our sales teams had grown to over 10x. We were down to just a quarter of reps missing were hitting quota, and deal slippage had actually reduced to just over a third. But that number doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. And I'm going to jump into that in a bit more detail. So when we think about the reps missing quota in the first 6 months of 2024, what we can see is that the win rates actually had dropped, sales cycles had got even longer, but deal values had increased. Now, when we look at why that is, as I look through the detail, my gut feel is that at the end of 2023, we were doing quite a lot of fire selling going on. We were anything we could do to get a deal over the line. And so we started to protect our rate cards a little bit more this year. And that's why I think we've seen deal values increase in the first 6 months of the year. When we look at deal slippage, as I mentioned before, that number doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. In fact, at the end of Q1, deal slippage had actually increased to 46%. But when we dive into the numbers, what we can see is that in the first quarter, we let nearly 10% of our sales teams go. And we also invested a lot more money in pipeline creation. So a lot of money going into marketing to generate a whole lot more leads. So really an interesting kind of state of affairs. We find ourselves in this situation where at the end of last year, most businesses were missing quota. And so, what do we do about that? Do we train our sales teams on how to deal with objections better and how to get them a lot tighter on their qualification and train them into how to run a very structured sales process? Or do we just get rid of 9% of our sales team, spend a lot more money on marketing, and then hire everybody else's poor performers? We can see in Q2, the sales teams grew by 18%. So unfortunately, we ended up most businesses choose the latter. So we spent lots more money on marketing, we grew our sales team, and my gut feel on this slippage number is that actually when we got rid of the
the bottom 9% that weren't performing, we cleared out their pipeline. And that's why we saw this dramatic drop in deals, in slippage deals, because there was a lot of pipeline that just wasn't real. So the final data point here is rep velocity delta. Once again, we saw some really interesting data points here. So the quota targets for the sales teams grew dramatically in the first 6 months of the year. Again, I think the reason for that is at the end of last year, we were cutting quotas so deep just so that we could try and give the sales team some good news so they could at least hit a number. But the delta between those top performers and the rest of our sales teams has got so wide that we now see that just 16% of sellers now represent over 80% of the revenue, new business revenue that we're generating. So that's quite a dramatic number. I think that's probably slightly over-influenced by the fact that we lost 10% of the sellers that moved on. But ultimately, we're still seeing a situation where a tiny fraction of our sellers are representing the vast majority of our revenue. So what we're going to focus on for the rest of this presentation is what is it those top performers are doing differently to the rest of our sales teams? Because we're now living in a world with just 25% of reps exceeding quota. And we're back in this, I love this quote that I put at the top. I couldn't quite remember who gave us the quote, but we need to recognize that if we just keep repeating the past, we're going to have the same results. So focusing the rest of this presentation on what we can do to replicate this success, and really in particular focusing on personas, relationships, and most importantly, engagement and the impact it has on results.
Before we jump in there, Guy,
Yeah.
we've actually had another question from Larisse Abbey, which is one that we can cover before we dive into the content of the presentation. But it says, how did you get the buy-in from sales to analyze their calls? Did they not feel that we were acting as big brother?
I think it's a really interesting question, and it's amazing how quickly the world around us has changed. I definitely remember kind of pre-COVID, it was a real anomaly for a call to be recorded. We now live in a world where we do most of our meetings on Zoom or Teams or Meets. And so we're not the only vendor on the market. There's lots of us out here that do this, but you can now record the calls in the meetings. You can now record the meetings, but the big leap in the technology that's changed is obviously AI. So one of the big benefits to having the sellers having their calls recorded is that they're able to refer back to them and reference all the objections that the customer raised on the call, and also talk about how well they or badly that they qualified the customer in the first place. So what's interesting is it's not necessarily every market, but even in financial services now, it's not unusual for calls and video meetings to be recorded. But the big change is how AI can now analyze hundreds or millions of thousands of hours of calls and give you insights as to what's actually going on. So at the end of each month, for example, you can see if a particular competitor is getting mentioned more or less on your discovery calls. Or you might find that a particular type of objection is being raised more often than others because you're not just analyzing a single call, you're now analyzing hundreds of hours of calls, and the AI is giving you answers as to what's actually going on in real time. And so the benefits to the sellers and to the buyers has got so great that we see people have just got a lot more used to being recorded, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Guy. One of the key things that we see across when we implement customers time and time again is it's how you present that to the sales team, how you communicate the benefits to the sellers, as opposed to this is a tool that's coming in to record your calls. This is a tool that's going to add tons and tons of value to your day to day, and it's going to give you back time to do more and more of the things that are actually going to make you the commission that you want to earn. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I'll tell you a really interesting little hack for everyone listening. It also matters what you call the call recorder. So more and more often now, call recorders can work in the background so it doesn't even join the calls. But if you have got a recorder joining the call, there's a big difference between it being called Guy's note taker versus Guy's secret recording activity. So actually naming the call recorder as something quite passive does seem to make people a little comfortable. And of course, there's nothing stopping you stopping the call recording halfway through if the customer wants to share something quite secretive or personal. Okay, so conscious of time, so we're going to jump straight into the second half of the presentation. And what we've looked at here is specifically looking at what's causing deals to close lost. And what we've got is we're looking at all reps here, and in particular at the data from Q2 or Q1 and Q2 of 2024. And we're comparing that to the close lost deals for top performers. So even top performers are losing their opportunities, but the reasons why top performers are losing those deals is very different to the rest of our sales teams. So one of the challenges we got with all of this additional money going into marketing and all these additional leads being generated, one of the stats we shared in our last presentation is that the volume of opportunities has increased by 25%, but the number of opportunities that match ICP hasn't really changed. And so what we find is that the top performers are much better at identifying which opportunities match ICP and focus their energies on those deals. We also know that top performers are closing off 30% of their opportunities as close lost at their discovery stage, while the rest of our sales teams are holding on to opportunities really for more around hope than expectation. They want to keep their pipeline as big as possible. Our job as leaders is to help the sales teams close off those opportunities earlier that are not right, where we don't have the right buy-in and right engagements. Looking at the reasons why deals have closed lost, we can see that the top performers are 2.5 times more likely to have the C-suite engaged much earlier in the sales cycle. And this has a big positive impact on win rate. We also know that they are much more focused on selling to ICP, while the rest of our sales teams will work any leads that come into them. So helping the reps understand what ICP looks like, and what I mean by ICP is ideal customer profile. So making sure that the sales team are focused on servicing the right type of customers. And then when they get them on that discovery call, making sure they getting much more engagement with the C-suite much earlier in the sales cycle, then they're much more likely to have a successful outcome. We also, one of the other key data points we can see is that very clearly is that when we get that engagement with the C-suite earlier, the sales velocity increases by over 9 times. So one of the things that we do here at Ebsta is score engagement with every stakeholder involved in the sales cycle. And when we look back historically at deals that close won and lost, we can see quite clearly that the top performers are doing a lot more engagement with the C-suite. In fact, they're getting a lot more engagement across the board than the lower performers. We know that win rates drop by over 40% when the C-suite are engaged late. So I'd encourage you to get those that don't allow your sales teams to progress past that stage 2 of your sales cycle if they don't have the right stakeholders actively involved in the sales process. So we need to all be a lot more focused on the gates and triggers that allow sales reps to go from one stage to the next. And personas are a key component to that. We can also see from the data that the number of stakeholders involved with sales cycle this year has actually increased quite dramatically. So for the SMB market, it's increased by 23%, and for mid-market, 37%. Now, we haven't seen such a great increase around the enterprise deals, but if you're working small or medium-sized deals, you should expect the buying committee to be larger today than it was a year ago. Another great hack here is that we know that getting that senior finance persona actively engaged in the sales cycle early has a materially positive impact on win rates. So don't be afraid to get that engagement with the CFO or the finance persona early. Don't wait to present back the solution and expect them to just buy into it. They want the same ROI as everybody else, so get them involved in that process.
Really, Guy, can I jump in there? Obviously, there's a key metric right at the top of this slide, which is velocity. We've had a really good question actually from Paul Lewis. Hi, Paul. Team, how widespread is the usage of sales velocity across SaaS today? He's slightly obsessed with it, but he wants to make sure it's relevant.
Well, I'm also slightly obsessed with sales velocity. We know that momentum is what drives the right outcomes. So if you're not already measuring velocity, then you absolutely should be. We can talk a little bit about what drives velocity. Adam, I know it comes up in conversation a lot in sales cycles that you're engaged with. What are your views?
Yeah, so velocity is the combination of the 3 metrics that drive sales, right? And we see time and time again is that it's with our customers that they're starting to lean on velocity more as a key indicator of performance. And in the pipeline, we're getting more and more questions around velocity. And a lot of the use cases that we build out is how can we drive that velocity, right? So we're talking about it with our customers, with our prospects. It's becoming that kind of go-to metric, I would say. It's not on the tip of everybody's tongue, but it is becoming more widely used and a very good industry barometer as part of the benchmarks insights that we do as well.
No, I agree. I think it's a key component. And if you're not already measuring it, it's something you should be on top of. Okay, so within Ebsta, we developed our own engagement score. So what we try and do is on every Salesforce record, we highlight how the sales teams are pacing against deals that look similar to that in the past. And so we'll highlight all the positive factors that are going well on the opportunity, but also highlighting the challenges that the customer is facing. Now, as part of that exercise, we're scoring engagement. So every individual relationship that we find in the mailboxes or the calendars or in the phone systems, we're showing you inside Salesforce, and we're giving each of those individuals an engagement score. So we're showing you how strong that relationship is, and if that relationship is trending up over time or down. And obviously you want to see those relationships moving on momentum trending upwards, and getting that engagement moving in the right direction is really key to a really good indicator the health of an opportunity. Now, scoring engagement is one thing, but we also need to know that we're engaging with the right personas. And so you should all be looking at maps of your kind of power maps of the buyers and personas that you're engaging with. We know that just only a third of opportunities had the best performing personas engaged during the sales cycle. So there's work to be done making sure that your team are engaging with the right stakeholders during the whole sales cycle. And so understanding what that buying map looks like and how multi-threaded they need to be at every stage of the sales cycle, as well as monitoring momentum or engagement, is really key. And as I mentioned earlier, getting that CFO persona engaged in the sales process early really helps. So don't be afraid. Or a lot of our sales sellers are kind of trying to avoid the CFO persona, but it's the third highest persona with a positive influence on velocity. So getting them involved early, I think the biggest challenge there is an education fee for our sales team and getting them asking our champions to get the CFO engaged earlier and explaining that unfortunately I'm not allowed to move out of this stage of the sales process unless we can get engagement with some finance persona at your end. And usually that unlocks that persona or tells you how real the opportunity is. So I thought it might be helpful to share with the group this heat map. And what you've got is high, medium, and low performers, and show you directly the correlation between how well they're performing and how much engagement they're achieving with the different stakeholders involved in the sales cycle. And you can see that it's not a surprise to see that the high performing sellers are the ones that are getting the most engagement with the C-suite, the VPs and directors. What's really interesting is that when we see the low performers achieve similar levels of engagement, their win rates are very similar to the high performers. So it just shows that even in today's market, with AI everywhere, relationships still drive revenue. Why is it that the top performers, those high-performing sellers, are able to achieve such levels of engagement? In my opinion, it's not that the lower and medium performers aren't wanting to engage with our customers. It's that they're perceived by our customers as annoying sales reps rather than as expert advisors. And the high performers are getting engagement with the C-suite because the C-suite see them as expert advisors and they present themselves in a way that allows them that means that the buyers want to spend more time with them. Now, when we look at on this graphic, it's quite an interesting one. There's a lot of data going on this slide. So one of the things, what we've got here is analysis of deals that close won versus deals closed lost. And there's a number of interesting takeaways on this. The first and most obvious one is this blue line versus the yellow. On average, when deals are closing won, we're getting 9 stakeholders actively involved in the sales cycle. And so know how multi-threaded the sales team need to be at every stage of your sales cycle, and don't allow them to progress out of those stages unless they're achieving that level of engagement. The next thing we can see is the volume of activity taking place at each stage of the sales cycle. And what's really surprising here is that where deals are closing lost, there's actually more activity going on than when deals are closing won. And so it's not about volume of activity, about the quality of that engagement. And we also know that the timing stage matters. And so when you start to see that there's been no activity for 7 days and there's no future activity booked, the win rates are going to drop by 65% on average. So let's make sure that when we're on our sales calls or when our sellers are selling, they are pushing for that next action in the diary, even if it doesn't happen for another 4 weeks. If you have it in the diary versus not having it, it has a massive impact on win rates. It's also worth monitoring when meetings are getting cancelled and depending on which stage they're at. But if meetings are cancelled once, then the win rates will drop by 18%. If you get 2 cancellations in the same stage, your win rate is going to drop by 58%. So monitoring all of this data gives you the tools and knowledge you need to walk into your pipeline inspection meetings and really have a productive session with the sellers. We shouldn't be walking in there asking them to tell me about the deal. You should already know by looking at the opportunity in Salesforce, the AI should be telling you what's going better than expected and what needs attention. Now, to try and quantify this in a bit more detail, here at Ebsta, we score every relationship out of 100. And so you can see there's 2 graphics here on the screen. The first one is showing us the impact of engagement on win rates. And it's quite obvious that when engagement is above 80, our win rates are high. And that's consistently across all of these businesses and opportunities that we've analyzed. But we can also see it's not just improving win rates, it's having a big impact on sales cycle as well. So the more engagement we see, the quicker deals are closing. So if you can move your engagement from good to great, you're going to have a big impact on win rates and reduction in sales cycles. And when you combine that, it leads to the outcomes that we're aiming for.
Guy, and I think that would make a really good time to drop our little poll, some engagement for the audience. We've got a lovely little pop-up poll that's going to be sent out to you. Should be up on your screen very soon. How are you currently monitoring which personas your sellers engage with? A, B, or C? If you could answer now, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Well, I'm interested to see what the results come out on that. So I'm going to keep going because I appreciate I've got a huge amount of time here and I want to add as much value as I can. So on this graphic, what I thought would be helpful for everybody is to understand the impact of, once you understand the impact of engagement on win rates, the next thing to do is to start looking at opportunities closing in the next 30 days and then your entire pipeline. Now, this is a graphic from a live customer where we could show them that they had 58 opportunities forecast to close in the next 30 days and that had engagement that was good, but not great. So 60 to 80, but not 80 or above. So it's a heavy lift moving deals that are really low engagement up to really high engagement. But if you're monitoring engagement, you're able, and you can see deals that have got a good level of engagement, but not great. Getting the sellers to lean into those opportunities, getting the managers and the leaders to also help by reaching out to their counterparts at the customer. Getting that engagement level from good to great, we know is going to have a big impact on win rates and will help reduce the sales cycle. So I'd encourage you, if you're not already monitoring engagement levels, to understand how much momentum you have on deal and opportunities, and really use that data point to drive the sellers to the right behavior. So I thought finish off by sharing a case study that we've done recently. So for this live customer, their delta between their top performers and the rest of the sales team was 4x. Only 20%, only 1 in 5 reps was hitting quota. We saw their win rates was down at 12%. Sales cycles were too long and their forecast accuracy was nowhere. So when we brought Ebsta into the business, the first thing we did is try to understand that impact of engagement on win rates. And once again, we could see that their win rates were 6 times higher when engagement was above 80. But their average level of engagement opportunities was just 67. But by showing this to the sales team in kind of a picture format, in just 3 months, their average level of engagement opportunities went from 67 to 83. And the same happened with how multi-threaded they were. So when they had more than 6 stakeholders actively involved in the sales process, their win rates were twice as high. But on average, they only had 3 stakeholders actively involved. So when we showed this data to the sales team in this kind of picture format, and they could see it easily on the opportunity record, we saw that in just 3 months, the average number of stakeholders involved with the sales process went up to 6. Now, for this particular organization, a VP of operations as their champion increased their win rates by 4x. But only 8% of their opportunities had that persona as their champion. After just 3 months, that grew to 23%. And then by automatically capturing, they were a medic house, they were using medic as their qualification tools. We put in AI to capture medic and score how well they qualified the customer from the call recordings. And that had a materially positive impact on sales cycles and slippage. Ultimately, that led to this kind of before and after picture. So you can see that the top performers' quota attainment really didn't change materially, but it was the B and C players that really stepped up very, very quickly. And ultimately, that led to this question around velocity increased by nearly 50% in just 3 months. This is the impact we can have if we're data-driven. And so obviously, this is not the only solution on the market, but whichever solution you end up working with, make sure you're monitoring this information and making it super easy for the sellers to understand what good looks like and how to win. So last couple of slides on Ebsta, we now empower go-to-market teams. So for sellers, it's all about AI-guided selling. So by understanding what the top performers are doing, we can make it easy to prompt the B and C players as to what they should do next. We help managers by unlocking those insights and making those pipeline inspection meetings 10 times more powerful. And then obviously for leaders, we've got what we call AI forecasting. And all of this has led to our brand new brand guarantees. And I'm delighted to share these with everyone. We only launched them 3 months ago, but they seem to be landing really well. So customers that sign up with Ebsta, we now guarantee will increase the number of reps in hitting quota within 6 months. We guarantee to get the forecast within 10% of your number again within the first 6 months. And we guarantee to get you live in 30 days. And all of these have teeth. If we don't deliver, you can actually terminate the contract if we don't hit the quota number. And there are other penalties in place if we hit the others as well. So I'm going to leave you with the QR code to download the H1 update. So I'm sure a lot of you downloaded the original report. But if you want to see the H1 update and the data and dive into a bit more detail, feel free to scan the QR code. You can also reach me via LinkedIn and on email, as well as Adam, who leads the sales team here at Ebsta. And Adam, if you've got any more questions, we've probably got a few minutes. We can go ahead and take them there.
Yes. So there are a couple of questions. Will we be sending out the recording? Absolutely. Yes, we will. There's a question around what are some of the tips and tricks around getting your top or getting your B and your C players to do more multi-threading, to become more multi-threaded?
That's a great question. And one of the things that saved the day, I think, for most sales teams is that sellers, even the B and C players, they want to win. And so what we found is when you start showing them, when we onboard a customer, the first thing we do is we fix all the data associated to deals that closed won and lost in the past. So it's not unusual, for example, to see a deal with 1 contact and 3 emails associated to it in Salesforce. So we'll go back and fix the last year's worth of deals to find out that on average, your buying committee is 9 stakeholders, and there's actually 250 interactions that take place during the 5 stages of your sales cycle. So when we go back and fix all that data, that then allows us to deliver you what we call our insight report, which is effectively a personalized version of the benchmark report. And that will show you what good looks like. It shows you all the top performers are doing at every stage of every sales cycle, or every different type of sales cycle. And when you use that information to show the B and C players what good looks like, suddenly they want to follow suit, because they also want to win. So I would encourage our leaders on the call to think about, understand what the benchmarks are within your business, understand what your top performers are doing, and make it easy for the rest of the sales team to follow. Part of that's about showing it to them in picture format, but part of it's also about taking away all this admin from them. Our sales teams have got a very small capacity for learn. And what we need to spend our time doing is, instead of teaching them how to use that small capacity for learning, instead of teaching them how to do their admin, that frankly, the AI can do better than they can, we need to focus our energies on teaching them how to deal with objections, how to run a proper sales process, how to get engagement with the right stakeholders at every stage. And so if I distill that down into one word, it's all about consistency. Understand what the top performers are doing and then introduce consistency all across the line and be clear around the gates and triggers between each stage of the sales cycle, and don't allow them to skip through stages. Discipline, and you'll see the numbers increase quickly.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Guy. I think one of the really tactical things that I see a lot is typically, in many cases, young sellers think that they have to be the ones that do all of the multi-threading. They have to be the ones to go and find those relationships. When in fact, actually, it's often the C-suite or the exec level in the business that have more of a persona, they have more of a network, a black book of contacts. What your sellers need to do is actually leverage those connections and leverage those relationships that the C-level hold across the business in order to be able to pull the right strings to get the correct alignment and the correct multi-threading. It's really about the AE or the seller being a quarterback of the process of the multi-threading rather than actually necessarily having to do all the multi-threading. But just my 2 cents.
No, I think that's a great point, Adam. I think, I try my best to attend as many sales meetings as I can, not necessarily the whole meeting, but if I can join in and say hello and introduce myself and make them aware that, certainly if they've got C-levels joining the meeting from their side, and make them aware that I'm their executive sponsor and they can reach out to me, it gives them some confidence that they know that someone senior level is aware of the sales process that they're involved in.
Great. Okay, I think that wraps up the questions.
Well, we've got one more in the series, I believe. So join us next month. There's going to be, again, fresh content and more data points. And I hope you get to join us there. I'd love any additional feedback. If you want to reach out on LinkedIn, it'd be great. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, guys.